season 3. We're here. Constellation Energy. I typed into the chat GPT, tell me who Bazaj from Constellation Energy is.
Okay.
And here is what you get. Rajiv Bazaj is the Vice President of Sustainability Solutions at Constellation Energy, where he leads initiatives to help businesses reduce carbon emissions, enhance energy, and meet sustainability goals. So Raj, you're just so people know you're a friend and a colleague, and we're working on a project between Yukon and Constellation Energy. I think that's a very nice summation of what you do, and it sounds good. But like, you could also take it down another layer and go, Raj is Superman saving the world, one company at a time. So which intro would you like for the David Noble Show?
Yours sounds very interesting, but David, I think the reality is that I have the best job in the world, right? Because I get to do something that I'm very passionate about as a job, get to meet a lot of people and help them solve their problems to make our world, the planet, a better place for our kids and grandkids. It's perfect.
If we talk to a 12-year-old, it's tough to tell them, hey, become a chemical engineer. You could have the best job in the world, right?
Yeah.
And like, I think we've talked about this previously. Like, man, it is a super exciting space that you're in, because you have policy, you have economics, you have geopolitics, you have you have technology.
Yeah.
Like, you have a full spectrum of things to be working on. And I can tell you, we would have never been having multiple interviews with people from an energy company in 2000. But today, like, the world is, this is the future of the world.
Yeah.
This is the biggest problem on the planet, and you're working on solving it. So,
I mean, energy was boring, right? When I came into this business about 18 years ago, I mean, it was dull.
Yeah.
And every day was kind of the same day. Today, I don't know what's coming the next day.
Yeah, you've been in the studio for an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. By the time you're done this, the energy world could have changed in that hour. 45.
I was actually presenting at a conference. I was on a panel in Houston, and while I was talking, literally, I was getting a text about something that was going on in the PJM market, which is going to change things very dramatically. So that's how fast things are happening right now.
So when you think about this great job and where you're sitting in Constellation, right? What is getting you excited about tomorrow and the next couple of years?
I mean, the world is evolving. Things are changing very rapidly right now. And I think what excites me the most is the technology. I mean, technology, it's been evolving in our space for a while, but the acceleration, the slope has just changed. And so when I start extrapolating and looking at what can be over the next 10 years, it's going to change the world. And it's going to change the world in very dramatic ways. And, I'll use fusion as an example. I mean, I learned fusion in college a long, long time ago. Continue to hear about it. It's the holy grail. But nothing was ever really going to materialize. Now there are startups, a lot of money coming into the space, and there's an opportunity here for something to happen in fusion that could be real and transformational.
These spots, and then you have the micronuclear reactors, right? Like, maybe I'll get one of those for my house someday.
Yeah,
like,
you never know.
I think when we were in the kingdom last week in Saudi Arabia, I actually missed a call right now with them about micronuclear reactor research. Those words don't make sense together, right? Like, a nuclear reactor is an entire city.
That's right.
So, like, where do you think, not where do you think, where do you want to see the world evolve in its perception of energy? Like, if you were educating people What should the average person think about this?
It's a great question, David. And I think to start with, we have to start looking at energy as something that's more holistic. You don't have good, bad, and ugly and put everything into categories and buckets, right? We have a need for energy in this world. That need is increasing. And the first step is to figure out how can we get nice, clean energy available for everyone on this planet.
Yeah.
If we don't do that, that's the foundation of the pyramid.
Right.
And from there, you need to start thinking about, okay, what's the best way to make it more efficient? What's the best way to drive technology? SMRs, you were just talking about that, small modular reactors. I mean, that's one way where you can have a micro reactor that's 10 megawatts.
Yeah.
Or you could have an industrial SMR that is 150 megawatts, which could power a city, which could power an industrial zone. So that takes pressure off the grid because things also, unfortunately, don't move in parallel, right?
Yeah.
So we may have the best technology, but if we can't move that power from point A to point B, which is a huge bottleneck in the US and across the world, then you're really not doing anything about it.
That makes me think I need to probably go talk to the folks at Savant because they have this behind the panel technology too, right? Like
Mhm,
what makes me think of that was things don't move in parallel,
mhm.
right? Like, but yet how many variables are built into the energy needs of a home, of a business, of a city, of a country. Like these are it's basically an infinite set of variables, and yet we still have to figure this out. We have no choice.
Yeah, and then you start thinking about policy at a federal level, regulatory changes, state level policy as well, and that makes things even more complex.
Right.
Mhm.
We were, you're a geek when you end up in an interesting conversation about predicting the energy ranges needed across days and times. And so last week I was looking at some data and it was 23 years of energy needs and weather based upon, and how off
Mm.
their predictions were. And, in December, it's like massively off. And in August, it's almost crystal clear. Like the range is nothing. What they really got me interested in was now with data coming into this,
Mhm.
we're using AI and data tools to make predictions, but now we're able to actually record our predictions and then start to do research on how our predictions performed.
Right.
And it's like, because I always think to myself, like, how does mathematics stop? How does mathematics research stop? Well, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you figure something else out, now you know a whole set of questions to ask that you couldn't ask before. And I think about sustainability solutions in that sort of way. Like we have a big overarching goal. Let's call it net neutral carbon footprint, something like that in the future. And now we have to go and design a set of solutions for that. So how do you start to tackle a problem like that? Because that's as we just set it up, that's a really complex piece. And I think it's interesting to people and students. How do you solve those type of complex problems?
I mean, David, that's really what a lot of large companies are trying to figure out right now. And you really can't think about it as an assembly line where you have one strategy and you just implement it across the board. It
Right.
doesn't work that way because companies, they're located in different parts of the world. They have different size facilities. They have different end users. Um, and the source of the power that they can get is not the same.
Right.
So you really have to sit down and on an individual basis try to understand where a company is today with their carbon, where they're trying to go, and then how do you put a plan together that also takes into account technology, other risks that may show up over this period of time and plan accordingly. Because you can't just be very rigid anymore when it comes to a strategy, when it comes, with
Yeah.
energy. You have to have flexibility. You have to have the ability to change and pivot very quickly. You have to be a gunboat. You can't be an aircraft carrier.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think this is, why I talk about this on the David Noble Show. Well, one, we give this to students, right? And I think people need to learn how to tackle these problems because this is not just a energy problem. This is a food problem. This is a water problem. It's a housing problem. It's a transportation problem, right? It's across all of the fundamental building blocks of
Touches
society.
everything. Yeah.
And each of them are interdependent. Because like one of the things I think about when you were talking about small nuclear reactors and small microreactors is how big can you build a city now? How high can you go up? Does this allow us? Because structurally, civically, we can probably go higher, but we have energy, water, all those needs. But how dense can a city be with the right amount of energy and right distribution of energy? And like we start to end up innovating on our entire society.
Yeah, I mean, David, I honestly feel like the kind of things you're talking about is the transformation we're going to be seeing over the
Yeah.
next couple of decades, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all of the things we've learned over the last 50, 100 years that we think are the way to get things done, building cities, for example, the architecture of buildings, all of those things are changing. I was actually with a lady last week talking about data centers.
Mm.
And, the size of the data centers has been fairly standard for the past few years. And now, they're getting bigger and bigger. And when you make them bigger, it's not just the servers that are coming in. There's a lot of other things about that building that are not going to be the same. You can't cool things down with water, for example, anymore. You need to use some other chemical because the weight of the water
It's too heavy. Yeah.
is too heavy. It can cause all kinds of problems. So
Which anyone that's picked up a case of water can understand that. Think about it like that. Like pick up a case of water and pick up a bag of feathers
Exactly.
and like, there you go.
So if you have 10x the servers, there's a lot of heat. You got to figure out a way to cool it down in a different way. So the architecture of these data centers is not the same.
Yeah.
And this company, they help architect and build these new data centers. They were talking about how some companies are very stubborn. They don't understand the gravity of what's going on. And they've built some data centers where the energy consumption is actually a lot higher than what they anticipated.
My career took a real pivot the day I stopped shaking my head yes when people told me this is the future. And I said, well, if it's the future, I should understand it. And if I should understand it, I can now be critical of it or positive behind it. And it was actually big data. I was in the meeting early in my academic career, shaking my head, and I was like, how do I know any of this is true? And I started digging into it. And that's how I ended up in my first data center. And I will always remember it because it was like negative 15 degrees that day. And it was like 84 degrees. And well, I won't say his name, but he was like in a panic about keeping the temperature down, cooler. And like you go outside and it's the coldest day in years, right? And so you're trying to I don't think people know the complexity of data centers and the complexity of the technology that they use because all they care about, well, remember when they had those T1 things and the guy would come in and he'd tell you this is going to do this and this and this and it's 700 gigahertz and I'm like, dude, does the internet come on when I press the button? Can I put the internet on and talk at the phone at the same time? These are the functions and that's how people think about energy, right? What is their normal interaction with it is at the thermostat.
That's right. Yeah.
And turning the lights on and off. Yeah. And then they look at their bill. Other than that, they don't understand the complexity driving that for most people. And so I often think like, well, how do you start to learn about this? Like, because again, you go back, the students are out protesting every oil company, and I'm like, come on, guys, like, who's investing the money in hydrogen? Who's investing in clean energy? It's all of these folks. Stop the oil pump tomorrow. See what life is like. And so as an energy company or as working on the energy side, What is it that you wish people would go and start to learn?
The biggest thing right now, David, is the fact that, everyone is focused on we want clean energy. They only think about solar and wind,
Mm,
right? And the sun is not always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. Europe is a great example of some of the bad things that can happen. We actually had an incident in Spain and Portugal earlier this week,
yeah.
right? Where things went down for
Well, I mean,
several
there's a
hours.
war. There's a war in the Ukraine
Yeah,
because of energy decisions in Western Europe.
that's right.
Period.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the way we think about it is natural gas has to be part of the solution. Now, we're not saying that it has to be part of the solution for the next 50 years, but you need natural gas as a bridge to get from where we are today with increasing demand. And, it's just not data centers, but it's EVs,
Yeah.
it's electrification,
Eh,
it's onshoring. I mean, every day there's a new company that is making an announcement. I just heard today Samsung may start building their TVs here in the US. That's a lot of energy, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna have to come from somewhere. So first, let's figure out with gas how we can address the immediate problem. And then on the backside, with AI and technology, we will find innovative ways to clean and get to where everyone wants to go. Because I think the end goal for everyone is the same.
Right.
Where we are today and what we do right now is where there's a gap.
Yeah.
Uh,
The idea. No, I'm not saying there aren't some bad people in the oil world, but I'm saying the idea that there's millions of employees working at these companies, and all of them are out for the destruction of the universe, right? Like, come on, common sense is common sense.
yeah.
Like, you got kids. Like, people want good lives for their kids, for their grandkids, for the next generations. And I find this miscentered idealism, I would call it. You don't call it that. I call it that. Um, as something like I really love when people can break down the nuance of these problems.
Mhm.
And society has evolved in a marketing way to not have any nuance at all, like black and white. And yet, energy, food, water, housing, transportation,
Yeah.
you can't do those things in a simplistic way.
David, I was at UConn a couple of weeks ago,
Yes.
right? And I had the opportunity to host around 15 students for dinner, right? And there really wasn't an agenda. It was just a meet and greet type thing. And one takeaway for me is that that's the kind of stuff we need to do more is
Yeah.
educate the youth, right? Because they're reading stuff on social media, they're listening to stuff on TV, and everything has a bias, right? So if you sit down with them, you try to explain what we're trying to do and why it's so important for them to listen and understand so that they can be part of the solution to get to where they want to be. They're idealistic, but they're also very open-minded is what I found is they listen, they ask a lot of great questions, they challenge you, but then at the end of the day, they also are different. In my case, after dinner, people came up to me and said that, I had changed the way they were thinking about energy.
And I think that's a great point of how corporations can interact with students today. And I think one of the most successful groups of corporations in their interaction, recruitment, education has been the Big Four. Used to be Big Eight when we were in school, but now it's
Mhm,
down to Big Four. And what they do so well is they're there from day one. So
mhm,
if you're in an accounting program, you're going to meet people at PricewaterhouseCoopers in year one. And they're going to be along a process of educating you as to how to build yourself for a career in this field.
mhm,
And I think that's a really great model to do it. Sometimes you're bringing in knowledge specifically, but sometimes you're just building community. And I think that would be I think you're absolutely right. That's an effective way for energy to come in and have a more nuanced conversation because as we trust each other and as we build relationships, nuance becomes part of it. We start
right,
to listen a little bit more. We start to pay attention a little bit more and we question not just one side, but we question both sides. And I've seen them have mastered impact and retention of value from that. Because again, there's a battle for talent too, right?
Mhm.
Like you want the best people at Constellation Energy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and you're recruiting now at the forefront of all of these places.
And there's a trust that was established that day, right? I think to your point, um, these folks now will probably think of the company differently than they did before that dinner.
Right.
Uh,
No, without a
mhm,
doubt. Because you have to. Otherwise, it's
mhm,
not just a word and a logo.
mhm,
And I think if I were advising companies on their interactions with colleges and universities, I would be looking at a more holistic approach. And I think Constellation and UConn are trying to build that, right? Where there's research, there's education, the certificate program we're working on, and then also recruiting.
mhm.
Recruiting should always be a part. Whenever someone's on a college
Yeah.
campus, they should be recruiting people. Like, okay, this is talent. This is talent. Because those three things sort of fall into alignment. Not sort of, they do.
They do, and I think there's also with students, the word of mouth is so important,
Yeah.
right? When you have an intern, which we have one right now from UConn, and she's going back and saying that, hey, I'm trying to arrange a dinner.
Yep.
Who would be interested? By the way, I'm having a great experience working at Constellation. It's
Yeah.
not hard to bring people in to want to have a conversation.
Constellation is one of the biggest companies in the world now at this
Mhm.
point and growing. Do you find the students understand what Constellation is or the opportunity within Constellation? Because I think I could look at it from my mindset and go, wow, this is an entry level place to impact the world.
Mhm.
Um, and not just like, oh, I'm in energy. Like you're in a major energy company working on a lot of the future looking stuff. Is that message resonating with the students?
At UConn, it definitely is.
Uh,
I was very pleasantly surprised when I was doing the interviews for the interns on how much research they had done on
mhm.
Constellation. And in a couple of cases, they specifically talked about professors mentioning Constellation
Mm.
in terms of a company that is multidimensional, is doing a lot of different things, and putting us in good light. So, I mean, absolutely independent, right? I mean, these professors are, as part of their curriculum, talking about energy and uh, discussing Constellation as an organization that is doing a lot of things in the right way. Mm.
So I've spent a lot of time. I'm quick and make a lot of jokes about things. I think people misunderstand me in that regard. They don't take the time to realize or hear the thought process that goes into some of the things that come out of my mouth. Um, I I've been, as I said in a previous moment, I've been working in this field roughly 25 years now, but on from an intellectual place, not so much, uh, much less actual work and much more study and thought and discussion. And I can't imagine how it's like how it must be to work where the government changes, everything changes. Like and that could be federal or state or even local,
Mhm.
how the CEO changes and now we're going to change our strategy. Cuz energy, you don't think about how responsive you have to be to those clients. And so how are you thinking about building those long-term relationships now that you're in a much more dynamic environment from Constellation side?
It's definitely very challenging right now. The uncertainty is a concern for a lot of the companies that we work with because they have strategies. They were actually feeling pretty good about where they are and achieving their goals in a timely manner. They've communicated that in many cases to Wall Street as well.
Mhm.
But now, they either the prices have gone up, or they just found out that the solar field that's going to be built is going to have solar panels coming from Asia, where the tariff is going to
Increase the
increase the
cost.
price substantially. And so there's a lot of folks that are trying to figure out, what is a way to to change that strategy, to modify it in a way where they still are trying to do the right thing, but maybe slowing things down or doing it differently.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of focus on energy efficiency,
Yep.
right? I mean, that's the easiest way to reduce your carbon and to lower your cost at the same time in many cases. And David, the other area that is very quickly evolving is demand response. So I'll touch on that for a minute because it shows the pivot, right, that
Mhm.
companies are trying to make. Because as demand is increasing and prices are going up, there's a need to drop demand during peak periods. What people don't realize is that all you hear about is demand increasing and the percentages by which it may increase, but 97% of the time there is more than enough power to maintain the growth that
Yep.
we're looking at. It's only that 3% or so of the
Yep.
time where, there's a peak need and we have a void, and that
December.
void is increasing,
Yep.
right? So if you can actually at that time go to large industrial customers, for example, or data centers, and they have a financial benefit and they're willing to drop the load
Yeah.
and stabilize the grid, you
You
resolve
create
the problem,
win-wins.
right? So you don't need to spend billions of dollars to build new infrastructure, to build new generation, and get to a point where, the cost and the impact is very long term, but you don't get the immediate benefit that we all need. I mean, there's no magic bullet to
Yeah.
get that today, except for doing these types of things.
You were from the chemical side, right?
Yep.
So did you ever touch the fiber optics stuff? Like that's off your
Peripherally, yeah,
peripherally.
yeah.
So what, the basic component was we went and laid fiber optics everywhere and everybody went bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
Like, cause like all of a sudden,
Yeah.
we spent all the same money building the same infrastructure over and over again. This is a really good example. If everybody goes and increases by 3%,
Yeah.
no, you're running 97% of the time. Yeah.
That's a great example, and I'm gonna start using that because that didn't work out too well,
No,
and
it was devastating.
yeah.
It was devastating. And I think that's exactly it. We can't have a bunch of bankrupt power plants. We can't
Mhm.
have a bunch of bankrupt transmission systems, right? These are essential needs of human life. So let's pivot a little bit and look at your career line and like where you're coming into Constellation. You're a young person. We just had a great example of that. How do you share a view towards their career? How do you communicate? Because you like to work with the students. You're finding energy in it. You're talking to the younger employees, coaching them. How do you talk to them about to view their career?
Well, I learn a lot from my kids, right? So I have two kids that are in their 20s as well. So, eh, you can't tell them what to do, right? That doesn't
Right.
work. You have to listen to them. You have to understand their point of view. And then you have to talk to them as adults in a very engaged conversation. So that listening piece up front, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I have learned over the years, and I mean, listening applies to everybody, but with youth and especially, um, giving them a chance to start the conversation is
Mm.
better versus you starting the conversation and providing your view and for
Yeah.
them to get defensive. So that's a starting point for me. And then I feel it's really the social media part of things. That's where they're getting a lot of their information,
Without a doubt. 100% of their news is coming off of one of the
and
social platforms.
that can get myopic over time, right? I mean,
The
the
algorithm's
feeds,
designed to
yeah.
do that.
So that's what they're doing. So how do you then engage them in a wider conversation of expanding that lens again, so they can start to think about other variables that
Mhm.
maybe they hadn't thought about, or maybe over time, because of the feeds, is no longer part of their thought process. Mm.
I like to send students to leadership development programs at the early point of their career where they're
Mhm.
going around an organization and trying a number of things. And recently I've been trying to design that for someone I'd like to hire. Like,
Mhm.
hey, I want to make you a CEO at 26. What do you need to know
Mhm.
to run a 25 to $50 million company? Okay, you need to know something about acquisitions. Okay. Can I get you to work over here? Can I send you you need to know this? Can I send you there? And I think that sort of, if you're coming into energy for a career, which, again, health, right?
Yeah,
Like after health, this has to be one of the highest growth areas in the economy.
no doubt.
What are some of the areas that you really need to see and understand to be able to prepare yourself for a long-term career success?
I think internally, they're at least from our company's standpoint, and I think Constellation does a really good. Uh,
People are happy that I've met working at Constellation. And so, yeah, I think
yeah, I
that's a
mean,
good perspective to take.
we take a very holistic view of developing our team, and the exposure across multiple functions. I mean, it's a very complex organization. So it's very easy to get in your silo,
Yeah.
kind of do what you need to do and get good reviews, and just keep on
And get a
going.
2% raise. Yeah.
Yeah, get it. Yeah. And so life is good, stable, everything is great. What we are trying to do more is expose people into other parts of the organization so that they can y- you in the past, maybe the silo could have worked, but now we're saying we have to dissolve these silos. We have to really become one organization. We have to move people and rotate them into different positions so that they are able to understand the complexity of our business,
Mm.
and we can grow and scale our business that is our future, not the business that we've had in the past. Because we're leaders. We've been leaders. We've survived the financial crisis and COVID and everything else. But that's great. But that's the past, right?
Right.
The future, we don't really even know who our competition is going to be moving forward,
That's a fantastic. I've been saying
right?
this for 10
Yeah.
years. Back 10 years ago with the finance sector, hey, your competition's not the other bank.
Yeah.
Your competition's Google, Apple Pay, PayPal. Like the tech companies are your competition. And I think you're exactly right. Is like you don't know who that's going to be in 10 years.
And so our customer is changing, regulations and policy is changing, demand is changing. So we have to change, right? And
Right.
and our infrastructure, we're putting a lot of emphasis on using more technology internally, using AI. We have a
Right.
whole initiative to start. I mean, I use Copilot today extensively. 3 months ago, I probably didn't even know what Copilot was. I probably knew what it was, but I wasn't doing
Yeah, it
anything
was
with
like a
it.
little logo on the
Yeah,
screen. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we have to do those types of things, in addition to giving exposure to our people and giving them more opportunities.
Yeah. That one of the things about dissolving the silos, I think, is so from an innovation perspective, when you build a silo, that's your silo.
Mhm.
You defend your silo, right? Like that's your empire.
Yeah.
Like you keep it to yourself and try to protect it. When you start to dissolve the silo, now you're able to see solutions. My favorite part of that though is dumb questions. If you've been doing something for 10 years and you're really good at it, you never ask a dumb question.
Yeah.
But when you come in, you ask a dumb question. And sometimes those dumb questions are like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
we got to think about this. That's a stupid question. I've hit this microphone 2 out of 3 interviews. That's a stupid question, but that has us thinking in a different way. And I think getting dumb questions into your work life is now important, where 20 years ago, it was just a problem.
Yeah, dead on. I think you hit the nail on the head because we've had situations where we've rotated people into other functions, and now they're looking at our business. We are feeling great about it, but there's something very simple in some cases that we have overlooked, which this person in
Yeah.
the first month tells us about, and it's shocking. And you can either get defensive about it, going, "Oh, you don't know what you're too new. You don't know what you're talking about," or you can say, "Well, this is great.
Uh,
Why don't you do more of it?"
so the sarcastic me goes, I'm an idiot.
Yeah,
Like that's such like you've pointed out something that's so glaringly obvious. And yet I've been in this space for 10 years and I've never once even
yeah,
contemplated it.
yeah,
And like, but man, when you start to do that as a way of living and a way of working, it can be a really exciting career. Someone was trying to say, well, David, you need to really brand yourself better and you need to claim these things as yours. And they were in my car and why don't you do this? And why aren't you telling this? And I was able to lift up the whatever between while I was driving, open the thing, reach in and pull out a plaque. And it says, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets credit.
uh-huh. Great point.
And that's been my my belief for a long period of time. Yeah, I'm always interested. I'm always like, I'll give you the credit. No, this is my silo. I have to protect it at all costs.
Yeah,
And that hurts institutions. I mean, institutions we care about when you like they love that institution too. It's not like the innovator has the moral authority of love of the institution.
well, it's not a zero-sum game, right? I mean, you don't have to have a winner or a loser, right? So what I always tell people is the pie is going to get bigger. So everyone is going to win. If the pie is getting bigger, that's the only thing you should be worried about.
Yeah,
Credit will come along with it. So if you spend all your time trying to make sure you get the credit,
yeah.
the pie is going to get compromised. And that's we all lose if that were to happen.
That that
Yeah.
that's the engineer's way of explaining that, right? Like,
Yeah.
because that is entirely there's some people in the world that believe it's a zero sum game, and there's some people that believe we should be growing the pie.
Yeah.
And depending upon how you look at those two things, really impacts how you collaborate and grow, especially in a dynamic industry.
Yeah.
And I can't, energy going from like one of the most static industries in the world to one of the most dynamic in what has been 2 decades, but feels almost overnight, right? Like,
It's happened very
yeah,
quickly.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, one other thing, David, that we have that I have recognized is that from an organizational standpoint, last year I had people that had been in a role. They had a job description for that role. That job description in some cases was written years ago and nothing ever changed. So I decided that I was going to change their job descriptions, and that's when it hit me is there's a lot of stress and anxiety that can be caused because of
yeah.
all this change, right? So as a leader, as a manager, it's also very important for us to first understand the dynamics of what's going on and then to work with our team so that that change management piece becomes critical. How do you work with your team individually, address each of their anxieties and stresses that they're working through in their roles and help them so that they can make this transition along with everybody else as
So,
easy as possible.
so to be an executive
Mhm.
in a major corporation, you not only need to know what you're doing, you need to know your customers, but you also have to be a psychotherapist
More and
to
more.
manage people.
Yeah.
I agree entirely with you, the
Mhm.
anxiety component and the cost of change
Mhm.
on people's psyche. As an organizational psychologist by training, that was actually what got me to go from behavioral finance to
Oh,
leader. Like this side was
uh-huh.
resistance to change, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, those things are real. Like I see those every day because I everywhere I go, I'm trying to change things. And so I agree. I've found a lot of value in trying to just calm people down first. Because if they're not calm, you can't have a conversation on how to solve problems in the workplace, how to grow businesses, how
Yeah.
their role, a big one on anxiety, how do I fit into this new dynamic?
That's a huge thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 30 years and now I got to learn something new. I mean, and it's going to be, for Grace that was here, Grace's career is 10 years longer than your career.
Mhm.
Like that's just the world. And so that's a whole nother decade of change with a set, like it's harder for us to change than it is
Yeah.
for her. So
And David, the whole vision, right, that comes from our Joe Dominguez, our CEO, we have to make sure that we are connecting the dots for everyone in the organization because a vision is great, but what does it mean to them
them. Yeah.
is even more important.
Yeah.
So how do you have a cadence where you're continuously feeding information to every single employee within your company so they can clearly understand what's going on and the impact it's going to have on them and their team?
And then David Noble says you need to just like get rid of compliance. Like
Just get rid of it.
Just get rid of them. That's the first step to any innovation whatsoever. All right. So the ChatGPT question for you. They're good. This guy's good. Whoever's in here
Mr.
typing it out,
ChatGPT.
yeah, like he's good. So real simple. What would be a great question to ask Raj in a podcast?
Okay.
I didn't want to go with the celebrity lookalike for you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
I didn't tell her. It's the woman from Handmaid's, Serena Joy from Handmaid's. They're like dead on everybody. So, but because she got Margot Robbie, you're gonna let someone catches that from ChatGPT. You let them take it. So, what's the most misunderstood part of a company's journey to decarbonize? What is as someone that's living this life, and this is topic number one in so many people's minds, especially young people, we have to decarbonize. We have to decarbonize. What's the most misunderstood part of that journey?
I would say it's not an on-off switch, right? I mean, you can't. We've had customers come to us and said, I was on an earnings call, and the CEO said that we're going to go to zero carbon in 5 years. What does that mean? And that's a very dramatic example, but that's the kind of way a lot of folks think about decarbonization. It's a process. It takes time. You have to be patient. You have to think about it. You can't do it by yourself, right? If there's one person in a company cannot create a carbon strategy. You need all the right stakeholders.
No, Raj, you got it all wrong. The board says we need a strategy. The CEO goes and finds one person, isolates them. They write the strategy, make a nice PowerPoint, and we never talk about it
And then
again.
it's done.
That's the way to do it,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, I mean, there's an option A and an option B.
No, but I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think depending upon the company, you may be working on vendor relationships, you might be working on customer relationships, thinking about that whole capacity. Like you can't not make revenue tomorrow.
That's right.
To be net, like that's a good way to be carbon neutral, carbon zero. We
Shut
don't do
everything
anything.
down.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. And like, we always like to allow the guests a chance to either ask me a question or ask themselves a question that I failed to ask. So
I think I'll talk about UConn.
All right,
a little
let's
bit.
do it.
Because as you
I'm
know,
passionate
David,
about it.
I know you are. Yeah. I know you are. And, it's interesting.
I no longer tell the truth about UConn. My silence has been purchased.
Great.
Yeah. Just giving you a heads up.
So, 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I was following UConn, but was not really engaged
Yeah.
with the university very much. And because of getting pinged on LinkedIn, and I'll give Kimberly
Yep.
A shout out here. Kimberly pinged me, brought me into the UConn community. allowed me to really understand and see where the university is, where the university is going, and how critical sustainability is
Yeah.
for Radenka, and the vision that she has is mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
It really shows how um, education has evolved since I graduated a long, long time ago,
Yeah.
right? And it shows how uh, futuristic UConn is in terms of where it's going. The business school, the engineering school, working together with Constellation right now, I think is taking the next step. Because
That,
again, going back to silos, how do we now take two great parts of UConn, put them together to really work with a Constellation to help us do more for our customers is an incredible partnership. So I'm very, very excited about where we are and where we're going.
so that sort of thinking is I think the future of higher ed, if higher ed is going to thrive. I think the old processes and the old and I certainly have colleagues across the university that it's only about them, right? And 20 years ago when I got in, they said, well, this is, I know there's University of Alabama, right? But we're really 5,000 sole proprietorships under
Mhm.
this one banner. And that doesn't work today. And it led to a really disjointed educational process. And it separated research from teaching entirely. And I'm not saying there isn't parts of research that should be really hyper focused on knowledge creation, right?
Mhm.
Pushing the boundaries. But I think the mission is lost and it's going through a reflective period of time. And what what we talk about at Worth Institute is this network driven innovation. Get smart people that care in the room, and it doesn't even matter what the first step is. You just take the first step and then you figure it out. Because I could plan for 9 months, but when the rubber meets the road, it doesn't hold up. The plan I think Mike Tyson says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? So someone, well, you don't work well with others. Someone once said, I work really well with people that don't make me sit in a weekly meeting, uh, in with 74 people. You know what I mean? Like, give me the couple people. Call me when you need me.
More is not better.
More is not better. We don't need everybody's perspective, right? Like entrepreneurship, there's only like 4 or 5 people that really work in entrepreneurship. But because it's such a big
Yeah.
topic area, kind of like everybody wants to identify with it.
Mhm.
And so I think like, well, what does 100 billion plus energy company have to do with entrepreneurship, right? And I'm like, well, the, there's no entrepreneurship without those companies thinking about these bigger problems, signaling these bigger
Mhm.
problems, and creating the liquidity
That's right.
for the investors and the risk takers and the entrepreneurs on that end. And so if I were building something in the energy space, I'd want Constellation. I'd want, Royal Dutch. I'd want these guys looking at what I'm doing and helping form the innovation in the process as I go. Because they're going to buy it. They're going to distribute it, right? They're going to make it institutionalized and systematic.
Mhm.
Startups disrupt and change, and then that disruption and change becomes institutional.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it doesn't have impact, right? And I think it's tough to make $1 billion plus company. It's really tough to do it in a vacuum. And so, I think at the same thing, it's tough to reform the university, but it's really tough to do so without the biggest employers in the world around the most important future topics sitting at your table talking to you today about what's important 10 years from now.
And scaling, right? You're talking about scale, time to market, all
Yeah.
that type of stuff, right? And I mean, the fact that you were able to put a curriculum together
Yeah,
in
well,
4 months,
yeah.
and we
Um,
already had our first group of cohorts go through it. I it's very rare. I don't know how a university, could pull that off.
I think because you have like the way we did it is we accepted that we were going to fail in certain areas. So let's make sure we succeed in certain areas.
Mm.
Let's find the failure as opposed to plan it out, because planning it out, we're just going to miss the part we don't see. And so when you go into the classroom, like I'll tell you right now, I was really impressed with Marvin's personality in the classroom, where I had
Okay.
never seen that part of Marvin
Yeah.
before. And so I didn't have to stay there more than 20 seconds and be like, oh, check, here's something now I need to go and think through. How do I take advantage of this component?
Yeah.
How do I make it better? How do I move this part out? And like, I don't build curriculum. I find people, and quite frankly, like we did that on a second go, right? And I think there's another 2-3 layers to go on, and that's why we're doing these podcasts and other things, is like, oh, we know to be effective at this in 3 years, we need a massive digital asset library.
No doubt
Like
about
pull it back and look at how are we talking about it, right?
Mhm.
I know in 3 years we'll be writing an AI program to look at our digital projections, our digital teaching, and say, what has changed in 3 years?
Right.
Tell us the 5 areas we need in this class tomorrow.
Yeah.
What is the next module that we need to develop to be a robust, dynamic program? But you have to understand, you have to have a partner that has skin in the game on both sides. And then you have to understand there's going to be a failure. So we're going to accept a failure. We're not going to accept a failure of not trying. We're not going to accept a failure of not caring. What we're going to do is accept that we missed right here, and now we need to make that better. And I think when you start that process and work in that innovative process, you can look across your network and go, all right, I missed this. Who's can inform it?
Take some risk as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So, well, thank you for coming.
thank you.
Look forward to continuing to build the partnership. And I'm going to need, to find 4 or 5 people that we have to go out into the world and bring back some commentary on the future of energy.
Sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.